Welcome to the Consulting Leaders Podcast, where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Guillaume Jouvencel, ex-PwC and co-founder of GHA Marketing. Join me as I interview the best consultants in their niche. Let's get on with the show. Alison, welcome and thank you so much for coming on Consulting Leaders.
My pleasure, Guillaume.
We did it. All right. What led you from language and international communication into building a global executive coaching practice? And what was the moment that you realized that this was the thing for you?
Well, I really enjoyed my career focusing on language and communication skills. And when I started my own business in my late 40s, I naturally focused on those, my main skills. But after a few years, I realized that it was never going to make money because I liked doing it too much. I did all the work with the clients, I did all the preparation work, I set up all the meetings and everything. And I realized this is not going to make money and I'm going to exhaust myself. So it was that moment I started to look, I need to move into management training, that kind of thing. And so that's where I started to move into presentation coaching, into cross-cultural work. And eventually I decided I was just going to lead on coaching only. But there was a transition, quite a lengthy transition while I looked at different options. And I've always liked one-to-one work. So you could say that it was coaching from quite early on.
What would you say, so that does make a lot of sense, and I like the inspiration to get into that journey. What would you say is the problem that you solve now, Alison?
Well, are we talking about now or are we talking about right through? Because if I talk about right through my career, it's been some aspect of confidence has been the crux of it. Even when it was language work for international executives, it would be the confidence that was holding people back. So they might have been extremely articulate in English, but because it wasn't their own language, they felt that they were less themselves than when they were speaking their own language. So it was an aspect of imposter syndrome, you might say, or confidence or self-concept, that kind of thing, which has run through all my work. And I think even now it can be a large part of what brings people to me. Does that make sense?
It does. So in that regard, when do senior leaders, right, come to you, what is the core leadership or communication problems that you help them solve and to achieve what results? Like what's the outcome of all this?
Well, if I look at a couple of recent examples, it's transition. Mm-hmm. Very often it's transition. So the executive is newly in position, knows that they're a bit too silent at meetings, that they're not actually making the impression they want to make. So it can be that kind of thing, stepping up into executive leadership. On the other hand, I've been brought in when there's been a relationship problem in the executive team. So a director who doesn't get on with their boss or some kind of glitch in a relationship, and it needs somebody from outside who's going to help sort that out. That's completely different, isn't it?
So that can be challenging then, right? And I mean in the sense of finding the right person. So who is it that you help today? Is there like a specific industry, a specific position, a specific industry? I mean, company size? that you see people benefiting the most? Like who's your ideal client?
Yes. Well, I think to answer one of those questions, I think you threw about
Yeah,
5 in there.
that's quite a lot.
Yeah. It's not one industry. That's
Okay.
for sure. And
Fair
that's
enough.
because of historically, when I was doing the English for professionals, it was any industry, any nationality. It was absolutely across the board. And so I've continued like that. And I find that's very useful because something that I learn from my clients, I don't mean confidential information, of course, but I mean, about how management works, how leadership works, or what a particular inner kind of glitch. I can bring that into another industry because if I was only working in banks, for instance, maybe all the things would be quite samey, but I might be working in the oil industry with one client, and then there's something that comes in there that can be really useful. So I think it's very helpful that I work across all industries. So that was one of your questions. Can you remember any of the others? Oh, yes, my ideal client. Well, size of company. I normally don't work these days, but I have done in enormous companies, enormous corporates. Recently, I would say, around about 500 employees, that kind of size, but many, many millions in turnover.
Makes sense. So in those configurations, then, who is really the decision maker? Because you help people who want to access leadership positions. But I guess that's something that they will have to invest in themselves, right? Or is it somebody within the company that actually makes the decision of training up their members, their managers,
Yes.
their executives?
Well, it's interesting you say that because I've got the impression that in the UK, and I'm working a lot in the UK these days, although previously it was more international. I get the impression that in the US, people tend to pay for their own executive coaching. But in my experience in the UK, people expect their job to pay. And if the job is not paying, they're quite unwilling to open their own purse strings. That's what I've noticed. But I would say who makes the decision? Well, the higher up the person who wants the work, the easier it is to get the work because then they have the budget, they have the clout, they can sign it off.
I like that. So how do you navigate this in your marketing, in your branding, Alison? Because when you're like, okay, this is the person benefiting from my services and my help. This person thinks that this other person should pay for it. This other person is like, it could be useful, but should I really pay for it? So how do you market? How do you brand? How do you get the right eyeballs to hear about, Alison Haill being like, okay, she might be the solution to our problem?
Well, it's always a different way. I have to say, I have not discovered the one way to get clients. Sometimes it's referrals, sometimes it's I send regular emails, and one of my emails picked up somebody who was in transition to an executive position. They hadn't had any management training for, I don't know, all their career in that company. And so their boss was endorsed the fact that they should look for a coach. And so it was fairly straightforward. But the way that why that was quite an easy sell was because the boss was behind it from the beginning. And there was the budget. Plus, when I was selling that first item, it was £10,000. It wasn't £50,000. It wasn't £100,000. So it wasn't such a large part of the budget, and it was seen to be important by the boss. So that was ideal, actually.
So what worked for you was mainly emailing people then? Is that how people
That
find
was a
you?
newsletter. It was a newsletter that went to all my corporate list. And on that occasion, I don't know how long that person had been looking at my stuff, but back then, that was a few years ago, you didn't need so many touches before you earn somebody's trust. But if you want
Why is
to
that
know
you
how...
think?
Sorry?
Why is that you think? Why do you think?
Well, I think because the market for coaches is overcrowded now. When I started, I was one of fairly few. And I also think AI has got a lot to answer for there, because people are all using AI. They're all making themselves sound super wonderful and wonderful results and all the rest of it. So that I think it's very difficult to stand out as somebody with extensive experience and really able to produce results with a coaching program. Also, I think the market is a bit, in some respects, it's a bit fed up with coaching. Have you disappeared?
No, I'm with you. I was picking up my pen. So that's what you're talking about right here. And I know we're taking a bit of a tangent here, but I think that's super interesting because a lot of B2B coaches and consultants will be able to learn from this. When you arrive into a market and you're one of the very few to help people with a specific service or like product, whatever it is, you have advantages and disadvantages. The advantage is that you're one of the very few, right? So competition is not fierce. You kind of get to dictate who you work with and at what price points. But at the same time, people are like, yeah, this is new, should I risk it? I don't know this. Should I need a coach? Like, what is it? And then there is the other side of the market where you have like an abundance of providers, of suppliers, which is the case now in the terms of like leadership coach. And the narrative is a bit flipped, like, hey, yeah, leaders understand the importance of having a coach now, but there is so many to choose from, so competition is fierce. How have you navigated that, this both sides of the coin, Alison? How were you doing it when you were in a niche where not many other people were, but maybe the product was less in demand, versus now where there is a high demand, but there is also a high amount of supply? How do you navigate this?
Well, it's interesting. You make it sound very clear and different, but in nearer the beginning, say, I've been running my business for 26 years. Now, when I first met coaching, which was more or less at the time when I started my own business, although I wasn't a qualified coach then. So say the coaching business has been going for 30 years. It wasn't that there was just a handful of us. It wasn't that uncrowded. But I think what I want to say is that in those days, there were a lot of people who didn't really know what coaching was. Well, that's still the case. I was talking to a qualified therapist recently, and they obviously thought they knew what coaching was, but it's completely wrong. He thought it was some kind of tutoring. So I think there's always been a confusion about what coaching is, and probably there will continue to be. So that's one thing. And when you start something new, you're absolutely right. There's not a great knowledge of what it is. For instance, I started something back in my language days, which I called diction coaching. I thought that could be really useful for foreign speakers of English. Well, nobody knew what it was because I just made it up. But now, 20 years later, it's on our website somewhere, and people come asking for it. So, when you're super, super new, people don't know what it is, and people probably don't know what leadership communication is. But as they get to know it, and as the market becomes more crowded, there's going to be more knowledge, but you're still going to have to find a way to make your voice heard. So I don't think I've got the magic bullet, but what I do think is that you have to be very careful with AI. And I think if you can be, this overused word, authentic, then you're going to have a better chance of being chosen because you seem genuine, and you are genuine.
So tell me more about your marketing strategy. So you're doing emails, you're doing newsletter. This is how people, find out about you. What else? How do you get the attention of the right people, of the decision makers, or of the leaders who wants to step up and are like, I need to get this? Like, what is the best way for you to acquire clients, Alison?
I think I mean, if you're looking for a single simple answer, I'm afraid you're not going to get that on this conversation because as we both know, it's a complicated thing, and I'm not a marketing guru, but I think doing a few things. I mean, one of my best clients came through networking.
Okay.
And it was a chance conversation. About 4 or 5 years later, this woman rang me up, said, I've got a real problem. Do you remember we met, 4 years ago? And that relationship with her organization lasted me for nearly 10 years. And that was, you might say serendipity. And then there's the emailing. I do that as well. And then I do stuff on LinkedIn, but I'm not convinced that has ever brought me a client. It may have done, but I think it's important to do what you enjoy doing, because that way you're far more likely to do it consistently. And I think it's also important to do a few different things. On the subject of, we've been talking mostly about corporate work at the moment, or large organizations. On the other side of my work, the mentoring that I do for women entrepreneurs, I do a monthly free webinar there. And for some people, that brings in a regular stream of new clients. It doesn't seem to for me at the moment, because I think I've got a lot of people who just want the free information. But I think that's partly to do with the uncertainty in the market at the moment, and the fact that seems to be a huge ballooning really about the attractiveness of coaching for the provider. I know at the business schools, they fill their cohorts for learning how to be a coach, qualifying as a coach, year after year. And so I think there's a lot of people out there who feel very new and want to get some free information. So webinars could be a way, but it's something I quite enjoy doing, and it takes me back to my teaching days. I enjoy helping others to, with my experience. So I think you have to do several different things. I tried Facebook advertising, it didn't work for me.
I think what you're talking about here is one of the biggest challenge for B2B coaches and consultants is like attribution is very hard. Not because we don't know how to market in this industry, but more because we live in a trust recession world, and having that brand that will allow you to get in front of the right people at the right time consistently, month over month over month, years over years even, is actually what's going to draw in people. So like attributing people to one single source of acquisition is not realistic, because they might have seen a post from you on LinkedIn. They might have heard you on a podcast. Then they might have checked out the website. But then when they were ready, it's because they saw a TikTok video where you were featured or talking. I don't know if you do some TikTok videos, Alison, but it's those multiple touch points that will, fair enough, that will help people gain trust with you and eventually end up reaching out to get help. So I think what you're explaining here is full of sense.
And is that how you work your business as well?
Oh, you're interviewing me now. I like this. So that's interesting, because the way I work my business is quite the opposite of that. What I mean with this is I believe in doing one thing, but doing it as good as possible, as well as possible. I was going to say perfectly, but far from me the idea that I'm doing it perfectly. I'm a huge advocate for podcasts. So this is what I do. I do a lot of podcasts. I interview a lot of people within my space to create those relationships, to create this network. And there is everything gravitating around my podcast, so that we have a private community of B2B coaches and consultants. There is like free resources that we put everywhere out there. So we're giving the knowledge away for free. We are selling the implementation. So building that network, that community of people who are like, they have all the tools, and it's up to decide if they want to spend their time using those tools or their money with me so that we can go faster. But so my one and only thing is podcast. Now, the thing that is interesting, and you got me on the rabbit hole here, is we are going to leverage multiple things to make podcast work. Meaning, how do we get great guests? We do cold outreach, but we don't do cold outreach to get someone into a call. We do cold outreach to get someone on a podcast. Then we do the podcast. We create great content, hopefully together with them, which is allowing us to build authority alongside with our guests in our space. Then there is the community. There is the different pieces of content that we're going to get out of the podcast. And that's how we generate lots and lots of leads each and every month. It's because we are constantly present thanks to one channel that we master very well, which is the podcast.
Well,
End of my rant.
The exact opposite to me then. And I do my scattergun of 3 or 4 different things. But I think it also depends. I mean, if you have a marketing department, if you're a solopreneur, as I am really, I have a team of associates, but I don't actually employ anybody. The model that I use is the associate model. So I bring in associates to help me, my virtual team, and I also bring in associates to work with the client if that's what's needed. But you asked me earlier on, why I thought that coaching was what I actually wanted to do, and what was the passion behind it, or what was I can't remember what you asked, but something about what made me think I wanted to focus in this area. Well, I suppose there are two or three answers here. One of the reasons that made me realize that coaching really was the thing that I wanted to focus on, because the thing about having a long career is you've done many things, and there's also many things that you can offer, but that doesn't work with marketing. People want to remember you for one thing. And finally, the penny dropped, and I decided it would be coaching. But I think early on in my career, I would say about 30 years ago, I discovered how because I discovered coaching outside my work, and I discovered that if I gave one-to-one attention to somebody, even if it was just for 15 minutes, and I was prepared to give them an honest appraisal of how I thought their English was. That was in the days when I was helping people with their executive English. They were so grateful. They really appreciated having the one-to-one time and having the honest observations and the honest, genuine, helpful advice. And so I created my own kind of style of doing that alongside my small group classes there. And interestingly, that's a combination that I've kept for all these 30 years that I've been working my own business. That when I do group coaching, there's always one-to-one sessions offered as well, because I don't think there's anything to beat that combination. But of course, the fact is that I'm doing it all live because I believe in live working together. And so it doesn't make it a cheap option, but it makes it a really effective one. And I think that's, so I believe in that combination. And I also believe very strongly in coaching, the kind of coaching that is non-directive, asking you, what you think your best options are, that kind of thing. But I do think coaching is changing now. I think the non-directive type of coaching is in some relationships absolutely perfect, but in other relationships, people want some advice. So I think things are changing. And now that there are so many coaches and a lot of them are new, I think there's room now for experienced people to be able to do a combination and to be able to flex it from non-directive to a kind of hybrid of consulting and coaching.
Ask it bluntly. How do you sell this? How do you, once you get the right eyeballs, once you get the right interests, once someone is interested, they are problem aware, they are solution aware, they start getting into your funnel, right? How do you go from eyeballs or like simple contact to SOW, letter of engagement, we rock and roll? In that constantly evolving world where things get more complex, you have like mixing of services. How do you, Alison, make your prospects cross the finish line and become clients?
Well, I think it can take a long time, and it can.
Oh, that it does.
Yeah, and one of the observations I would make is that in this environment of uncertainty that we've got globally, with leaders playing a different game, and these international organizations which are now becoming less powerful, like NATO, and being questioned, I think there's a lot of uncertainty around, and I think companies, especially in the UK, have been waiting to know, well, what's the future going to hold? We won't spend anything on learning and development for the meantime. We'll keep those budgets until 2026, and then we'll make a decision. Very many of my clients in the entrepreneur space are finding that clients want their services, but they're saying yes, but not yet. So that's one of the. Sorry, I've completely forgotten your question.
That's very good.
How do you get from the start to the finish line?
Yeah, but that's a very good point. Like let's call what it is, right? Let's call a cat a cat. I'm not sure that's a proper English translation, but that's how we say in French. The objection that you mentioned, which is, hey, yes, sounds great, I want to do that, but not now, is actually not that much a buy-in, but for later. It's stalling, right? It's like they're not ready to make a decision yet. They're like, yeah, maybe, but this is either not high enough in the list of priority or in the list of pains that they feel they need to resolve it right now.
Oh, yes, so, that's that too.
So how do you walk around that, Alison? How do you make people conscious of the fact that they need to act now if they want to grow? Because business and leadership love speed. Sorry, I'm going ahead of myself here. I'll let you answer.
Yes, well, I think what tends to happen with me is that somebody will contact me who's got a burning issue. Yeah. And that's, of course, the ideal client. Somebody who can no longer put up with that relationship or that boss or that whatever it is, and needs to have help. And so what normally happens is that they probably call me, or at least in the old days they would call me, and they would tell me what it was all about. And that would be quite a long call because it would all come out at what the problem is. And so that might be a half-hour call or 45 minutes or something. And I would say, well, let me think about it, and I'd say what's your possible budget for this, and they would tell me quite a small budget, and they'd probably tell me what they think they need, and I think probably these days I would normally tell them straight away, well, look, I don't think this will be sorted in that short a time. They'd say maybe 3 sessions or that kind of thing. But I would book another call with them and I'd come back with some ideas. And in most cases, I would say, or even if we didn't have even if I said this on the first call, I might say, well, look, I think this is going to take 6 months to sort out. I don't think you'll do it in, your 3 sessions. And if they said their budget was 2,500 or something, I might say, well, look, I think it's probably going to cost a little bit more than that, but let me have a think. And so I would come back and normally speaking, sometimes I would even tell them, that my 6-month program is for this kind of thing is normally such and such a price. And normally I would probably go back, and of course it would cost more because it was going to take longer. But I'd have thought it out and how we might do it. And I would always suggest that we talk with your boss next time, so that we would have a 3-way conversation with the boss and find out, what do they think is needed, so that we're very much, I'm always very much aware that if the organization's paying, the organization needs to get a benefit out of this. It's not just about the individual feeling better. And then we would go from there. Sometimes it would be, this would be done online. Sometimes it would be done again face to face. And then I would make a proposal. Or it might be slightly different from that. Sometimes it takes 3 or 4 phone calls or Zoom calls or Teams calls where the initial person wanting the coaching goes back to their boss, has a conversation, comes back to me and says, oh, well, they think this and da. And so back and forward we go. But in the end, it's if it's an urgent thing and it's really making waves in the organization, then probably my recommendation would be taken. But that then answers your question about the ideal client. The ideal client is someone who has a problem that's affecting them, but it's also affecting others, and it's affecting their effectiveness, so that the company is prepared to pay. And I would also, one other thing I would say is that very often the client comes to me and has this idea that 6 sessions is going to be what they need. Or the HR comes to me and says, if an HR comes to me and says, I've got a client who wants some coaching, how much do you charge? Yeah. I say, well, I'm very happy to tell you my charges, but I can't until I know more about the situation. So can you tell me the situation? Can you tell me the role of the person? Blah, 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 blah. And then I would probably avoid saying anything about pricing unless I gave a ballpark figure. I'd need to speak to the person who wants the coaching, because until you know from the horse's mouth what's important, how can I possibly know how we're going to reach success? So that's another aspect.
What's, for you, Alison, who has so many years of experience, what would you say is the next challenge that you're looking forward to take on? Like, what's the next thing that, if you crack that nut, you're going to take the whole business to the next level, if that's even the objective?
Like, well, actually, my objective is not to take it to a huge next level.
Okay.
Because well, it's not my objective. My objective is to do really useful work and to do it within my own time frame. I don't want to work 5 days a week rushing around the country like I used to do. I want to be able to work 3 days a week, and I want to be paid what I'm worth and get and make a really good impact. But what my next step is, my next ambition is something I'm launching next year, which is a mastermind for women who want to self-actualize. If you know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the top phase, once you've got your survival in place and you've got your recognition, etc., it's about self-actualization. How do you actually, that extra potential that you know is inside and that you haven't yet brought out? Maybe it's a book, maybe it's an income level, maybe it's a legacy that you want to leave to the world or to womankind or whatever. I want to have a mastermind that helps women to produce that next level for themselves. And that's what I'm planning. And I'm interested in anybody who wants that kind of support in a group where it's like the Three Musketeers, all for one and one for all, where everybody is working for the success of the whole group. And that would mean a lot to me, because that would make a difference to women. And when women have money and they have success, they use it in a different way. And I don't know if you know, but they say, but certainly in America, it's women who are buying coaching.
So I was in the US for the last 3 months, and I'm about to come back because I love it. And I learned over there that 80% of the purchasing decisions are made by women. So I'm also not surprised of the fact that women are the ones seeking coaching. That actually does make a lot of sense, 100%.
Yeah, well, I think there's a kind of, I think we've been brought up to feel that we should be modest and we shouldn't blow our own trumpet. So a lot of us feel that we just need to learn more until we are good enough. So there's quite a syndrome of not good enough in women that means they've been open to self-help books for a long time, and maybe that's the reason that they go for coaching. They're open to improving themselves. I mean, not to stereotype, because there will be men who feel the same, but I think it is something that's very common in women.
It does make a lot of sense. Alison Haill, ladies and gentlemen. Alison, if people want to find out more about you, see what you do, where should they go?
Where should they go? Well, I did say I was going to show you my book before I left.
Yes, please.
Yeah, because actually I wrote this many years ago, but it's a symbol of the fact that I really do think that coaching can change the world. And I've done a lot of work in introducing coaching into the world of education through schools. I've worked with 13 different schools to introduce coaching as an approach for managers within schools. And if you want to find out more about me, there's 2 websites. There's opcoxford.com. That stands for Oxford Professional Consulting. So opcoxford.com. And there's, of course, my LinkedIn profile. And for the women entrepreneur side of my business, there is AlisonHaill.com. Easy to recognize these 2 different parts of the business, because the corporate website is blue and the women's website is red.
That they actually find it. We'll put all the links in the description. What I can say for sure, Alison, is that you've gained at least 1 LinkedIn connection out of this. We are now connected on LinkedIn. Alison, thank you so much for coming on Consulting Leaders.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Guillaume.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Leaders Podcast. We hope you learned valuable lessons on how to grow your practice and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.